what's up? It's Debbie, and I am back with more True Crimes of Criminal Minds. If you've never been to my channel before, what I do is I watch an episode of Criminal Minds, and then I talk about a true crime case that was either mentioned in the episode, similar to the episode, or sometimes the episode is based on the case. So this week, we are talking about the second to last episode of Season 2 of Criminal Minds, and it is called Legacy. It's about a detective that was a beat cop and lucked into a promotion. His dad was a very decorated officer, so it's implied that he got the position because he accidentally did something like solving some kind of crime, and then because of his name, he got promoted. So he got put on the homeless beat, and he notices that homeless people are missing. And he was kind of just put on that beat to get him out of the way. And his boss doesn't believe that there's really a problem, because that's what homeless people do. They disappear and then they pop up other places. But the detective is convinced that someone is being abducted. So he goes to the BAU to ask for their help. I love this episode. It reminds me of the movie Saw. People are abducted, and then they wake up in strange rooms and try to escape. And they're told that they can escape if they escape before sundown. Then they will let them live. So this case is nothing like Saw, but it is like the portion of the episode where people are getting killed. So this week, I'm going to be talking about the Skid Row stabber, Bobby Joe Maxwell. But did he really do it? Let's get into it. When you think of LA, many things come to mind. Glitz, glamour, and celebrities are some of those things. Beaches, nightlife, palm trees, and the Hollywood sign up on a hill are others. But unfortunately, for some, LA is a place of struggle, fighting, and scraping for food, and a place to sleep on the sidewalk, in a tent if they're lucky. In the late 70s, the homeless of LA were in fear for their lives. Someone was preying on the poor and unfortunate inhabitants of Skid Row. The police arrested Bobby Joe Maxwell, but was he really the Skid Row stabber? LA has had its fair share of serial killers. Not long before the case I'm going to tell you about, there were the Hillside Stranglers, who were active between October 1977 to February 1978. Before that, in December of 1974 to February 1975, there was the Skid Row Slasher. This case became known as the Skid Row Stabber, so it wouldn't be confused with the other crimes. I kind of think it's still easy to get them mixed up. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but stabber, slasher, easy to confuse. They thought they were doing a good thing, naming them different, but whatever. Between October 1978 and January of 1979, 11 homeless men were murdered on Skid Row in Los Angeles. Some were dumped in alleyways, some in parking lots, and a few in prominent places. It's almost like he wanted them to be found. All the crimes were done in a 15-block area. The first victim was 50-year-old Jesse Martinez. He was found in a Skid Row parking lot on October 23, 1978. 32-year-old Jose Cortez was found stabbed in an alley on October 28th, and 46-year-old Bruce Drake's body was found on October 30th. In the early morning of November 4th, 65-year-old J.P. Henderson's body was found sprawled on a sidewalk. 39-year-old David Jones was killed on a sidewalk in front of LA Central Library 5 days later. On October 11th, 57-year-old Francisco Rodriguez was found dead in a parking lot, and the next day, November 12th, 36-year-old Frank Reed's body was found in another parking lot. There was another murder on November 12th, 49-year-old Augustine Luna. He was stabbed to death behind a building on South Main Street. Jimmy White Buffalo was found in a parking lot 5 days later. The 34-year-old Native American was stabbed repeatedly in the upper torso with a long-bladed knife. On Thanksgiving Day, 45-year-old Frank Garcia was found stabbed on a bench in City Hall Plaza, less than 200 feet from the LA Police headquarters. This is purely speculation, and it's not meant to be offensive at all. But because these names, a lot of these names are Latino, and because there's also a Native American in the group, I'm wondering if these were hate crimes or if it was just a coincidence. Hate crimes back then were not what we think of as hate crimes now. Back then, it was more about discrimination, like equal opportunity employment and those kind of things. But in 2009, President Obama signed the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act. The Shepard-Byrd Act makes it a federal crime to willfully cause bodily injury or attempt to do so using a dangerous weapon because of the victim's actual or perceived race, color, religion, or national origin. The act also extends federal hate crime prohibitions to crimes committed because of the actual or perceived religion, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability of any person. And I'm going to put a link in the description to the DOJ Civil Rights Division website if you're interested in reading the laws for yourself. Bobby Joe Maxwell was originally from Tennessee. He served some time in jail for burglary, and then he was released in 1977. And he decided to go to LA to get a fresh start. Only one source mentioned that he worked, but said he was a casual worker. Not really sure what that means, unless it's there are places where certain individuals who are not regularly employed can go and wait to be like a day worker, like, you know, like someone will come and pick them up to be a day worker. I'm not sure if that's what a casual worker is, but anyway, other sources said that he was unemployed. So I don't know if he had a job or not, but he did have an apartment. He was not a resident of Skid Row. And despite whichever of these are true, he was said to spend a lot of his free time on Skid Row. There were very few clues and no eyewitnesses. I'm confused because it said there were no eyewitnesses, but there really were eyewitnesses, which I'll get to later. There was a piece of cardboard left at one of the crime scenes with the word Satan scrawled in blood. At one of the crime scenes, there was also a handprint left on the bench where Frank Garcia's body was found, but there was no match to it. It wasn't a bloody handprint, it was just a handprint. And Bobby Joe Maxwell said that, yeah, he'd sat on that bench before. It could have been 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, and his handprint could have still been on that bench. In December of 1978, 29-year-old Bobby Joe Maxwell was seen doing deviant behavior to a sleeping person on Skid Row. I'm not exactly sure what that is. I mean, I know what it is, but I don't know specifically what he did, and I don't want to know. Then he was seen standing over a sleeping person with a knife. Not sure if it was the same person that he did the deviant behavior to, or if it was a different person. But he was arrested. He was charged with disturbing the peaceful order. His knife was seized, and he was also given a weapons charge. He pleaded guilty to the weapons charge and served several weeks in county jail. I don't know what happened to the other charges. I don't know if he got a deal and the other ones were dropped, but he only had the weapon charge, and he was in jail for 3 weeks. There were no murders committed while Maxwell was in jail. That could be a coincidence, or it could be damning evidence. I'm not sure which. 3 days after his release, 26-year-old Luis Alvarez was found stabbed to death. Now, maybe somebody was keeping track of the news and who was suspect and who was getting arrested and all that, and said, okay, he's in jail, so I can't do it while he's in jail. But when he gets out, I'm going to start back. I mean, that is a possibility. Here's the eyewitnesses that weren't eyewitnesses, and I don't know why. There were 2 men that survived their stab wounds. Ricardo Ceja, who was 26 years old, and Jose Ramirez, who was 27 years old. They were stabbed on November 19th. And I only found mention of the survivors in one source, and it confuses me. Because all the sources said there were no eyewitnesses, but wouldn't they have been eyewitnesses? Like, they were stabbed by the guy. And I get that there's probably a lot of homeless people that fear the police and wouldn't go to the police, but they were stabbed. Like, they had to go to the hospital, and someone had to ask them how it happened. So police should have talked to them and got a description of the guy, right? I mean, I would think. During the investigation of the murders, they found some eyewitnesses. They already had 2 eyewitnesses that they didn't even talk to. 3 friends of David Jones talked to the police and said that a black man had approached the 4 of them. He was around 30 years old. He was a black man with a Spanish or Caribbean accent, and he walked with unusual gait. I guess that's a limp or a stagger maybe, but he walked with an unusual gait. The man said that his name was Luther. The 3 friends said that he started up a conversation with them, and then Luther stabbed David and ran off. Why only David? How did the other men escape being attacked? And why didn't they come forward when it happened? I have questions, man. There was another clue found in January of 1979. Written on the bathroom wall of the LA bus terminal, Luther left a message. It read, "My name is Luther. I kill winos. I put them out of their misery." Bobby Joe Maxwell was arrested on suspicion of murder in April of 1979. His apartment was searched, and they seized shoes, clothes, letters, and diaries. They found knives in his apartment that matched the width and length of the wounds on 9 of the victims. Is that really evidence? If I go to Walmart and buy knives, and then someone I know gets stabbed, and then they come seize my Walmart knives and say, "Oh, your knives match." Well, yeah, because I got them at Walmart. Like, there's also a notebook that was found at his sister's house, and it had references to Satan in it. And I'm not going to say what it said. I will put it on the screen, but I'm not going to say that. His sister, Rosie Harmon, said that Bobby was raised in church and would never be a Satanist. He had other siblings, so I don't know if this sister is the sister where the notebook was found. But she says that he could not have done this. The trial was delayed for 5 years. It started in early 1984. And the reason for the delay is despicable, if you ask me. There is a dispute over publicity rights that were included in the lawyer's retainer. What? The lawyers thought, oh, I'm going to write a book, or I'm going to sell the movie rights. This is going to be a big deal and make some extra money. What? No. The trial was a very long trial. It lasted from January to July. A handwriting expert was asked to compare Maxwell's handwriting to the handwriting on the bathroom wall at the bus station, and it was declared a match. Police also had the handprint found at Frank Garcia's murder analyzed, and it matched Maxwell's handprint. The charge for the murder of Jesse Martinez was dropped for lack of evidence. That was the very first murder, Jesse Martinez. I don't think they had quite enough evidence for any of them, but that's just my opinion. The star witness for the prosecution was 37-year-old Sidney Storch, a felon with an extensive criminal history. He was a former cop who became an informant. He was Maxwell's cellmate for 3 weeks in 1984. He said that Maxwell was a Satanist and referred to Satan as Luther. That was the name that was on the bathroom wall, and also the name that David Jones' witnesses said he had introduced himself as. Storch said that Maxwell told him details of the murders repeatedly, and that he was killing people to obtain souls for Satan. On July 12, 1979, after a 3-day deliberation, he was found guilty of the murders of Frank Garcia and David Jones. The jury hung on 3 of the murders, Reed, Cortez, and Drake, and he was found not guilty on the other murders. He was sentenced to life without parole. He continued to proclaim his innocence and lodged appeals over the next 30 years. In 2010, the witnesses to Jones' murder were brought in to view a lineup. They couldn't identify Maxwell. One of them even said, "You've got everyone up there that doesn't look like him." It came to light that the witnesses had been pressured by police and gave false testimonies. Sidney Storch was found to have made up things to get favors in jail. He would even teach other inmates how to, what he called, book an inmate in order to get favors. He told them to look in newspapers and learn as much as they could about an inmate's alleged crimes and pretend that the inmate told them the details, which is exactly what Storch did in the Bobby Maxwell case. He read newspapers and then pretended like Maxwell had confided in him. It was found that Storch's testimony in 6 cases had been false. In 2010, Maxwell's conviction was overturned and he was granted a new trial based on the false ID and Storch's false testimony. In 2013, they were seeking to retry him for the 2 murders he was previously convicted of, as well as the 3 that the jury hung on, so 5 of the 11 murders. While awaiting that trial in 2017, unfortunately, Maxwell suffered a heart attack which resulted in a coma. The charges were officially dropped in 2018. Unfortunately, Maxwell never woke up and he died in 2019, never knowing that he had been exonerated. I feel sorry for him if he was really wrongly convicted, but was he really seen standing over a sleeping person with a knife? Would he have gone on to do worse crimes? But we can't lock up people for crimes before they're committed, right? Like, this is not Minority Report. You can't do that. And who was really the Skid Row stabber if it wasn't Maxwell? The killing stopped after Maxwell's arrest, but does that mean he was a killer? It could have been someone who was like following the case in the news, which I think probably most serial murderers do because they get off on this stuff, so they follow their case in the news, and he probably was like, oh cool, they arrested somebody else, what a great cover for me, and then, go off and do it somewhere else. Like, just because the murder stopped does not mean it could just be a coincidence. It doesn't mean that Maxwell was the one doing the murders, but I guess we may never know. So that is it for this week, guys. Thank you for watching. I love and appreciate you. And remember, be kind to people, love your family. Jesus loves you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.